Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to a not live coding 11Z's episode, but more just general episode that we wanted to do for you all. We're calling it Vibe Coding with ServiceNow Build Agents. I am Earl Duque, one of your ServiceNow developer advocates here, and I want Robert to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Robert Ninness. I'm a platform Outbound Product Manager, working with the ServiceNow AI platform.
Nice. So today is a different live stream. We're doing it at a different time slot, different day.
Yep. My fault.
I know it's what time is it for you? Is it 8 a.m.?
8 a.m. Yep.
Yeah,
so it's the live coding 8Cs or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so 8 a.m. for Robert. It's 3 p.m. for myself. We're coming to you from California and Australia. So we're a little bit on different ends of the world for you all. But one of the things that Robert and I have gotten into the habit of doing is whenever we're working together or recording something or talking about any given work, we end up having long conversations about AI, existential conversations about what it entails for us, what it means for developers, what it means for our jobs. But at a certain point, Robert and I were like, man, we really should just record some of these conversations because it's good for especially our community, because our community is some are understanding the way of the wind is AI. Some of them, some of our customers, some of our developers are still hesitant, and that's understandable. But yeah, those are good conversations to have, regardless of where you stand on it, because like it's everywhere, right? And so Robert approached me. You can talk about like what you wanted to really do for this stream.
Yeah, so we got a new product out called Build Agent, and as Earl was saying, like it opens up a bit of a can of worms in terms of like what does it mean for the ServiceNow ecosystem now that we have AI agents building applications directly on top of the platform. I mean, we had a little bit of that with app generation. That was more of a curated experience, though. Build Agent is wild in terms of like being able to, create applications and interact with the platform in new ways, and bring in code from other places, and in a way that makes it super accessible for people that haven't done a lot of coding before, especially on the ServiceNow platform, but does bring into question, what our role is as developers now or in the future. So we'll touch on a little bit of that. I want to show you the new product. I want to give you a couple of demos of what it can do. Try not to bore you too much with a few slides at the beginning, but yeah, ask questions in the chat. Earl and I will go off on tangents and talk about a bunch of stuff. I'm sure.
Yeah, we're really bad about it.
But if you have like at any time during the demos or anything, you have like stuff you want to see what happens if I shove it into an LLM connected to ServiceNow, we'll go ahead and we'll try and do some of those things for you as well.
Yeah, we're big fans of like show it as it is, be realistic. If it fails, it fails. I mean, I don't know. We were talking about this before we started the stream. If you want to start getting your share ready, we were talking before the stream, like, oh, what we've been playing with vibe coding in and out for different things. I've been using it a lot in not ServiceNow, so it's gonna be fun to talk about comparing it to the two. But I mean, it is vibe coding. It's a conversation through and through, talking with this AI assistant, and it does a lot of weird things sometimes. Like you'll give it at least like in Claude coding, like I'll give it a task and it'll do it and then go like 4 paths off the rails suddenly. And I'm like sitting there, like hitting the quit button. I'm like, stop, what are you doing? And so it'll be fun to do those things. Yeah. But if you have suggestions of things to try, or what if you did this, or what if you just mess it up intentionally, what will happen? That'll be fun stuff to do.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned Claude. Build Agent is built on top of Claude. It's thinking engine, and it is definitely, I wouldn't say aggressive, but it is a very excitable puppy when it comes to be like your coding partner and your collaborator. So we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to first quickly introduce a couple of grounding concepts that you may or may not have heard of. So IDE, ServiceNow IDE, ServiceNow Fluent, and ServiceNow SDK are really like the bedrock of what Build Agent is built on top of. So I want to just quickly talk a little bit about that, because we will be showing code. We will be showing like a node-based build system that Build Agent interacts with. And so yeah, we need to kind of introduce the audience to that a little bit. So currently, ServiceNow, the way you build apps on top of ServiceNow, I should say in the past, because we're now in the future where this is not true anymore. But it's still true for a lot of customers and for a lot of you developers who are building apps today, is you'll build directly into the runtime. And even if it's a dev environment, you're just building in runtime. Like you're changing a table schema. There's no build cycle or build phase. Whatever you create is directly represented as metadata in XML, and the system understands it and then changes immediately. This is like completely, not completely opposite, but it's quite different to traditional software development where you have like source code. And whether the source code is also the stuff that's executed, like JavaScript, or it gets compiled into something else that's an executable, you have source code that you can reference, that you can have other systems built on top of to help you write better code and write better applications. And so what we have this really, really awesome team called the ALM team at ServiceNow. They probably have a different sort of name these days, but application lifecycle management. This team really has thought critically and hard about how we can bring ServiceNow platform into the modern age of build tools. So things like Git don't really work with our XML update set world. You can connect an application to source control, source control like GitHub or GitLab or Azure DevOps. But what you get in there is just XML. There's no source. I mean, it is a source code in a sense, but it's not in a way that you can manipulate, or you can do diffs and code reviews and merge requests on really well, because of the way that the ServiceNow, the XML gets
Well,
popular.
I'll kind of argue with that on that one a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've done app develop on live streams via the XML, but it only works for things that are isolated to single file.
Yes.
So yeah, a business rule will be fine, a client script will be fine, or even a service portal page will be fine, because yeah, it has HTML, CSS, and servers and JavaScript, but it's all still in one XML file. So I've used Git and vibe coding stuff directly into that, fine. But the problem is, whenever you go into automation, like if you've ever looked at what files you do when you do a flow, like in Flow Designer, you do one thing and it generates like 30 files. And so that's where it all falls apart, because working with it with just XML is not easy at that point. But yeah.
And I would partially agree with you as well, Earl. Like, I was very much of the opinion of like, oh yeah, as long as we fix the branching thing, like, with which developer sandboxes, which we'll not go into today because that's a whole other topic, does fix, like we can do branching and merging on the current source code. But one problem we have is the separation of code from like metadata, or the design of a business rule you mentioned, right? So the XML file for a business rule will have the code embedded directly within, an XML tag. It's not really easy to just change the code directly and separately, I should say, without it affecting, that whole file.
Yeah, you're right. My mind was jumping into vibe coding era. You could vibe it, but yeah, editing a script inside it can't lint because it's already in an XML tag or anything.
Yeah, and you can't do things like, if you have a build system on the back end, you can't do things like, use SonarQube or linting or anything like that on top of the XML to see like, hey, is there code quality issues with this, because you're just ingesting the whole XML file rather than just like a snippet. Right. So anyway, we've moved from a purely metadata approach, and people will see this slide and be like, well, what's the difference? Because they look very similar in structure in terms of like, hey, we have a field definition here or a table definition here. It's just all we've done is take the XML and represent it as JSON. But it's much more than that. These are actual objects that have what we call the Fluent DSL written underneath them, which can have a whole bunch of extra activities done on top of them. So we've designed a language specifically for ServiceNow metadata called Fluent. It's TypeScript based, so it has a very familiar syntax to JavaScript that our developers know. It's very declarative in terms of when you're very similar to XML, and when you're defining objects, it's very easy to write and understand. You can actually build against it without having the ServiceNow platform involved. So as a source code, you can analyze the Fluent code that you or Build Agent has written, and check whether it's good or not, whether it actually will compile into a table or not. And all the parsing happens at build time, and not when you actually just upload it into ServiceNow and check whether the field is being built correctly. So there's one more slide after this, and then we'll get into Build Agent. Some things to know though is that Fluent supports a limited set of data types. I would say most of the scripting types it supports. So you can see these here on the left-hand side. And then it is, as you mentioned, Earl, like flows, complex objects. That's kind of upcoming in terms of how the Fluent language will support those, but that is definitely in the works, especially now that Build Agent relies heavily on Fluent. Talking about Build Agent specifically, one of the reasons why Fluent is so important for Build Agent is that one of the first things I did when I was trying out ChatGPT is like, hey, does it know what an incident record looks like in ServiceNow? Does it know what how can I build a table? And while yes, it can build the XML to define those types of objects, LLM's much better suited to writing code, especially those that have been trained on all of the JavaScript and TypeScript methodologies. So having a code first approach through Fluent is really, really important for Build Agents and LLMs to be able to understand the ServiceNow system. So with that, any questions from the chat or anything like that?
No questions, but I mean, one of those things, I mean, when I see the upcoming thing, I saw like, oh, flows aren't in there yet. And that's like a big thing in ServiceNow, right? Like a lot of automation happens via flow. I think I want to point out that, especially with vibe coding and pure coding frameworks and stuff like that, it's like, how do I put it? There's a big UI and web component aspect of how a lot of these apps are run. And so we're like, oh, there's no flow for this. Like, no, you could still, if you have a modern web UI, a lot of stuff can still be done even without those automations in the background kind of thing happening. I think, which we'll get into probably right now.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of those are defined in code at the moment. But the good thing about this build system is it's directly integrated within the ServiceNow platform. So I won't get into IDE and Fluent and the SDK too much. It is important to know how it works. But just be aware that if you do want to create a flow, you can include it in your application, and it will be just included, using those thousands of XML files that we already discussed. And you can create that in ServiceNow Studio or in Workflow Studio directly within the app scope. So Build Agent will be aware of it, but it won't touch them. So let's introduce Build Agent, and I'm going to introduce Build Agent by showing you something that it built, well, I built with it, and then we'll get into some of the code. Well, not the code, some of the conversations and the actual vibing. So this is an app that I built for booking EBCs. So at ServiceNow, we have an EBC center, the Executive Briefing Center, and I wanted to see how we could create a nice app to handle bookings for that. So the conversation flow is thus basically we have a brainstorming session with the agent to help kind of like understand the application and some of the key functions. And you can quite easily just single line prompt it. So in this case, I've just said, hey, create me an EBC booking app. The app will manage the work of requesting an EBC and scheduling it. And boom, that was enough to get started. So we created a scope, and then Build Agent then planned out how we were going to build it. So it's based on Claude. So it takes advantage of the thinking abilities of those style of LLMs to be able to plan and then do. And so Build Agent was directly like, okay, we need some kind of request, we need facilities, presenters, we need some way to record bookings, and then we need an interface. So immediately it goes off and starts creating the underlying schema or tables required for this. And then it creates things like roles and business rules.
And if I want to point out too, if you haven't done vibe coding before, like one of my favorite things is this, like if you read through its thought processes and how it goes about asking questions or planning, especially if you've used Claude Code directly in your CLI, where it shows you its checklists whenever it does anything. I code that way now when I do my own coding. Like the way it comes up with checklists and how it deliberately goes through it and updates the checklist and adds things as things happen, it's such a clean way of managing work that I've learned that from these tools. And so seeing that you're saying like this conversation interface is kind of is running off of Claude kind of is cool to me, because I've learned a lot about how to go about building and deving and stuff like that from just watching AI assistants do it.
It is a great companion, collaborative companion.
Also, real quick in the chat too, before we get too far from it, Swarnadeep on LinkedIn did ask how is this different with VS Code and versus Now Assist if they already use like GitHub Copilot or Gemini Code Assist. If you Swarnadeep, I don't know if you joined earlier, but Robert did go into a bit why this is a better way of doing ServiceNow application building, because it's so integrated with Fluent, which is the way it builds the metadata and how you can express the metadata in ways that you could still manually code in and work off of and use any other tool that you might have in VS Code and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of reasons why it's helpful using this way instead of using Copilot or Gemini Code or Codex or Replit or there's like 50 billion different ways to do it. But we talked about it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. What's the difference between like this interface, which is basically VS Code web, right? Mm-hmm. With an LLM chat on the side, versus this interface, which is local VS Code with a chat interface on the side. Mm-hmm. And it all comes down to tooling. So and deeper integration into the platform. So we provide Build Agent with a bunch of different tools to understand and interact with ServiceNow as a platform. So you can see here where the Build Agent is referring to knowledge sources. We give it a bunch of different knowledge sources on how to create tables, business rules, roles, ACLs, UI pages, columns, modules, etc., applications. And it can even query directly the database. It has read access to the whole instance. Meaning that it can inspect how the system is being built and interact with it directly. So, where is ServiceNow schema stored? It's stored in sysdb object and sysdictionary, right? So you can literally ask Build Agent to go and, what is the table that contains, is for this? And it'll come back with a bunch of different options and be like, oh, did you mean this table, this table, this table? And like, yeah, cool. Make sure you reference that in the field that you create. So that's kind of like the difference there. It's the deep integration with the tools that we provided. So, okay, so let's get to the first checkpoint. So it's creating a bunch of stuff. So it's like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff. We created some UI pages. We created some tables, roles, business rules, like just the foundation data. And then what Build Agent will do is that as it goes along, it will run the build. So if anybody's done any, npm build or npm run build or whatever, has done that before, it will basically do that on top of the application. And then it will get feedback because, the build system runs, it detects an error with, either syntaxing or typing, and it will give Build Agent feedback. It'll say, hey, in this file, you tried to use, you imported Boolean column from, the ServiceNow SDK core, but you never used it. So, and then Build Agent will go, oh, actually, cool. Yeah, you're right. I'll remove that reference. And then one of the cool things that I really like about it is that after it does something, it'll tell you what it did, and it'll give you some advice on like what to do next. Right. So it's like, here are the things that I built 4 tables. I built some roles. I built some business rules. I created a UI. I styled it. Here's the functionality that it gives you. And then here's some next steps. So it'll ask you to build and install, which is a lifecycle event that we haven't had in ServiceNow up until now, the actual deploy or install of an app. After a build phase, because usually you're just building directly and then shipping update sets. In this new world in ServiceNow IDE, you can actually modify the source code without it impacting what's live in the instance until you actually install it. Cool. So there was another build issue, like, hey, we're actually using React in one of our JSX files, but we never actually declared it in our dependencies. And Build Agent does this a lot. It kind of like forgets that it has to add in dependencies sometimes. So yeah, it had that feedback loop where it fixed itself, and then it happens a couple more times. It has that kind of like build, get the errors, fix them kind of thing. And then eventually we do deploy. And then it's like, hey, here's your app. Boom.
Yeah, and here, Matthew, I'll have Robert show it, but Robert, Matthew asked on LinkedIn, can this system create UIs? Basically curious how this page we're looking at right now is assembled. And if we go back to the structure, it's that there's a UI page that the agent built for this purpose.
Yeah, so this is a great example of the separation between like the metadata and the actual code. So this is the UI page definition here. So we've got a file system in ServiceNow IDE. Here's our UI page definition. We import UI page, which defines a bunch of different properties for that metadata. And then, that's imported from ServiceNow SDK core. Once we support other things like flows and stuff, we'll add them to that as well. But the definition of the HTML is not stored within the the metadata file itself. It's stored within an import here. So we can see we've got a client folder, index HTML. So if we look at that client index HTML, here's the HTML for the UI page.
Which also is importing other HTML and stuff from other files. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it has a bunch of stuff that it imports from the SDK, and then it imports, main.jsx, which you can have a look at. And here's where we start using React. So this is not built on our UI Builder design system. It's basically running React on the front end. Yep. So it's a modern React-based UI stack. So that, I mean, you'll see, like, I think it's called Bootstrap, the design system or something.
It looks like Bootstrap.
Yeah, exactly. So like it'll, you can basically import like whatever kind of styling you'd like into that.
Those buttons and the colors it picked is very Bootstrap.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it created a page for us to submit a request. And then, as we went on, I have to scroll back up. I refined it. So I'm like, hey, like, can we go and create?
Well, you did both. You refined it, saying like, hey, can we add this? You also said like, hey, you messed up this. Can you fix this? Combine these two pages instead of having one. Like, add a calendar view. Like I saw you.
Yeah. So one of the features that I asked for is like Kanban. Hey, can we have a Kanban board so we can schedule this stuff? So it went and built it. There was some issues with the layout, so I asked it to fix those when it added like a new panel and things like that. So yeah, like the Kanban board was kind of like a next step on top of that. So the drag and drop, it's all built using Build Agent. Like this little availability thing here where it's like, hey, this presenter has already been allocated 3 days of this week. They're not available, etc. Like it just added that. I didn't ask for that. Like it was just like, hey, I think this is a cool feature to add. It's probably seen it somewhere where it's like, yeah, let's add some little things there. So we can add resources and presenters to it. I mean, ignore the fact that some of this stuff is just like sysides and whatever. Like this is just a rough MVP, right?
And that can lead to so many different conversations too. Yeah, I mean the point also that's why it's like this stuff is very powerful if you are a developer, right? If you know how these things work, how the records work, how to script and code and stuff like that, you can go in and fix all of the things that it might have messed up to get it to the get it to the 100% that you need it to be. But like, so we're showing off before we start like creating stuff from scratch as a fun like test. Like the thing that Robert is showing, this EBC app, I saw the recording where he built this. It was less than an hour long. Like, so that entire interface with the tables and the logic and the UI, the React UI that does the drag and drop and all that stuff. Like this was all generated in less than an hour with just conversing with this build agent saying with this like process. And this is a common process when you're vibe coding. You prompt it, it builds it, and it gets errors and fixes its own build errors. You look at its results, you refine it, and you say like, hey, this should be this way, or I want to do it this way, and then does it again, and then you repeat that process and over again until you get to that like last 95% before you have to go like, okay, there's some things that it can't seem to figure out. I'm going to code it now.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those, I mean, existential things where like on one hand, vibe coding can be like really, it's like low code or / no code to the extreme, right? It's like, imagine this interface, instead of it being like conversation IDE, like files and code, it was conversation UI. And you just kind of like went back and forth where it like actually had a reactive style build where it built something and then immediately refreshed with the new thing. Like that's how a lot of other vibe coding platforms work. like that kind of thing is like scary in the sense that, you know, not only are you taking developers out of the equation, in a sense, but you become as a person much more of a director or a product manager rather than a developer. And it's only until you get into a negative feedback loop where you can't fix something, but you try so many different prompts and you get just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, that you actually have to dive into the code. And if you don't have the skill to kind of like, you know, right click, inspect, and like step through some of this stuff, you're going to get stuck. So one of the things we have in Build Agent is the ability to revert. So like we have checkpoints at each of your user inputs, that it's kind of like a shadow Git where we kind of like have a commit history across that's separate to actual source control, but you can revert to any known state, which will help you get out of those kind of like poor feedback loops.
I'm kind of interested in the architecture behind that, but we don't probably want to get into that. But
we don't really.
My favorite, because you said the negative feedback loop of sometimes when it's good for you to have the skills still, because if you get into this negative feedback loop where it's not doing what you want it to, eventually you just need to like manually do something and tell it to resume from there. My favorite thing that these AIs do, at least with Claude, is that if you get frustrated with it enough and keep telling it like, no, you're not that way, do it, I wanted it this way, no, you forgot again, oh no, you still didn't do it, no, you still doing it. Many times I've had an AI assistant basically say like, okay, it seems like it's not working, and it will delete the whole module and say, there you go, the error doesn't exist anymore. And it's happened like it's happened multiple times to me where the AI was just like, you know what, we're just gonna remove it, and we can, if you want to keep going, we can start over from here. And I'm like, oh, all right.
Test passes now because there's no code to fail the test.
All tests passed.
Like that's all areas that we kind of exploring. Is like how to make this like not necessarily bulletproof, but like self-healing, and this kind of flow of, you know, build, find the errors, and fix it is just one step in that. So there's a few other things before we get into the live demo. I asked it to create user documentation. So like, hey, I mentioned before that, you know, we have, you know, Build Agent has access to different, all the tables within ServiceNow, and it can create records in those tables as well. Shipping as part of the application, I should say. So I was like, hey, can you create a KV article in the style of a user guide for me? And it did. So whoops. So here's the user guide for the application.
Nice.
All put into knowledge. There's other things as well. It's like, hey, you know, can you? I was like asking if it speaks Dutch. You know, can you actually create PNGs? It's like, no, I can't do that. You know, it's not multimodal yet. You can't like take a screenshot of the app and say, hey, this is broken, and then dump it into the context yet. But it was like, hey, I can do this instead. So I was like, okay, can you create like the ER diagram of the tables you just created? So instead it was like, here's a mermaid diagram of like the tables.
Yeah, I guess any React library would work, right? Like that can create those kind of visuals.
Yeah, exactly. And it stored it, you know, in the application itself. So there's an MD file in docs that includes that kind of metadata as well. Yeah, so let's take a look at something a little bit more interesting now.
While you're loading up, our favorite local ServiceNow witch doctor on LinkedIn said, so you made that Kanban via React. What about like, oh, if you wanted to use VTB instead of building its own Kanban board? I had that question too. Like, can we prompt the build agent to build out, like, build the XML file as is? Don't worry about the Fluent side of things. Because I'm going to guess it needs a Fluent metadata type.
Correct.
But if you don't, can we have it build a raw XML file and shove it into the app or something?
That's actually an interesting use case that we should try, because IDE is this kind of like file-based experience now, right? So we have a file structure of of our application in there is a folder where XML files will be created. So like, for example, if I were to switch over to ServiceNow Studio and do exactly that, or like even, sorry, in the listen forms and just create a VTB for this, it would be created as XML, which we could then see, in our metadata explorer. Here's all the stuff that has been created in this application. So it'd be interesting to be able to say, hey, can you create this XML and just like drag it into a folder, like move it?
Yeah, and I would wonder, like, go create it in the core interface and create that Kanban board, and then go have it document the structure of those XML files, that metadata, for usage later in generating it from scratch. I would wonder if that would work.
We can definitely try. So let's create a new app. Let's take what kind of app are we going to create today, Earl?
Well, okay, this is the part where we should ask people from the audience.
Yeah.
Let's potentially one shot or a few shot of a new app. So if anybody, I know there's a delay on these streams, so we'll give it a minute to see if anybody has an idea of what kind of app we can vibe code from scratch right now. But if nobody answers, then I did make a list of things we could potentially try.
Yeah.
The app I made, I vibe coded, was like a dish rating personal dish rating tracking app that me and my wife uses to track, like, oh, we like this dish from this restaurant, and when we came back a year later, we didn't remember, so we used to have a ServiceNow app that we would use to track that stuff, but then I turned it into an iOS app using mostly vibe coding. From the chat, I'm seeing there's a question: can I set up coding instructions, like a config file or like an init file?
Yeah, you can absolutely. The best way to do that is to. There's two ways actually. One is to add it as part of a knowledge source, and the other is to just have like a markdown file within your app and say, these are my coding. This is my coding style guide. And then you just say, hey, Build Agent, can you go and read and understand that markdown file, which is called blah, and it'll search your repo for that file. And then it'll be like, okay, cool, I will follow these styling guides when I write code from now
on. The one suggestion we got from chat is a Visa application app, which is very relevant to how many people are in our community is spread out around the world.
All right, let's try this. So one thing that I've found recently is that Build Agent can be very ServiceNow focused. So let's talk about, we need to frame it in the sense of like, hey, this is enterprise. So many of my employees, so this is part of like, HR or one of the employee modules, have actually no, let's do Visa sponsorship, require Visa sponsorship.
Have you done a Whisper Flow plus Build Agent workflow yet?
Whisper Flow, is it bad that I don't know what that is?
Oh, it's just another voice to text.
Okay. No, I haven't, but like I could probably just use Mac Dictate or something like that.
That's true.
Many employees require Visa sponsorship for visiting head office. Can we create a So I'm framing it in the sense that it's like, hey, this is actually for a for my business, for my enterprise, because I asked it the other day to create an app for what was it? It was, I've forgotten. I can't remember. Let's say it was. Oh no, that's right. It was my Stripe example. I was like, hey, I want to create an e-commerce platform app, and it was like, oh, that's not really ServiceNow focused. And I framed it into like, oh, it's for ordering hardware replacements, and they're like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. Okay, cool. So we're in a brainstorming session now. It's like, hey, great concept. Let me understand the visa application workflow better. Do you need to collect information from the employees, all this kind of stuff?
You could just say, ain't nobody got time for that. Just make those decisions.
Yeah. I'm doing a live demo. Let's just see what you got.
You could talk through it in a second. I got a question in the chat. Is it possible to use Build Agent to log unsuccessful access attempts? That's not really Build Agent. Build Agent's building the app that would be behind the structure of things. What you're probably thinking of is an AI agent, which can definitely do that.
So we've got a bunch of, like you'll see in this workspace, I actually have a bunch of different applications in this workspace. So workspaces in ServiceNow IDE aren't like one-to-one with apps. You can actually have multiple apps within a workspace. So you'll notice we've created this visa sponsor application. It'll handle all of the bootstrapping around like the actual, scope, all that kind of stuff. It's basically setting up the build system. You'll see it just installed a bunch of dependencies for Now SDK. And so now it's created the app shell. Now it's understanding my ServiceNow instance. So it went to read, oh, what can I actually build? What can I create? So it's just getting straight into it. So it's starting with a table called visa application, and it's creating a bunch of roles. So it's creating some business rules as well. You'll see that it like has these tools to like interact with the file system here, creating directories. So we've got a business rules directory. So business rules doesn't have anything in it at the moment, but it'll go and keep building the application.
Something I'm not used to in this one is how gung-ho the build agent is about just starting to create stuff. Can you ask to be a little bit more like hesitant and ask, get approval from me about different things it's going to do first? Oh yeah, you said okay.
Yeah, it's probably part of that prompt. So you can absolutely, like, it is just like AppGen, it is very like, oh, okay, I'm going to do the thing now. So you can, in your initial prompt, you can say, hey, we're just planning for now. There are some instances where, hey, you do need the base, like the actual app shell to be created before it can do stuff. But it's like, don't create any files or table or anything like that. Just let's brainstorm for a little bit. And I've got a demo in a bit where I'll show that Build Agent actually created a bunch of stories. So we did a brainstorming session, and instead of creating the application, I said to it, it's like, okay, cool. Now write the stories for this app. So we can take it even a little bit slower. So it's created a bunch of stuff. It's going through its feedback loop at the moment, where it's like, oh, I've added a whole bunch of things. I think it was reference column. Yeah, reference column that wasn't being used.
It'll ask us its own TypeScript errors now, or warnings.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fixing its own issues, own warnings.
Which a lot of just JavaScript on ServiceNow users will not be used to that warning.
So yeah, we're building and installing the application. So it's just some tables, roles. It's got some sample records and a business rule. There's no client yet at the moment, right? So all it did was create, a visa applications table. It created a bunch of roles, and then we can have a look at the table itself. So
I'll give you a nice little link straight to the table.
Yep, nice little link, and it also created some demo
data.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
As well. So it did workflow. So if we have a look at the table itself, there's probably like a application status here. So it's created a bit of workflow in terms of like the choices that are available. And then, as Claude is known to do when you're coding with it, it's like, here's your next, here's what I've done. And like, we can sort of talk about next steps now. So what are next steps?
And then, so the same person that requested us trying to make not the same person, different person. So, for this app, have the build agent for this app to have a UI theme similar to ServiceNow rather than having a separate UI. You know what? I don't know if I would ask it to make a new UI for it. Then, if you wanted to look like ServiceNow, I would just build the process into the core UI. Then, it would create the documentation to tell the user to go to this table, click the new button, and then make sure the roles are separated accordingly so that they don't have delete access. I would just build it into the actual UI instead of making a separate one.
Yeah, so I mean, you can just, as I showed you, just switch over to Visa sponsor. Switch over to ServiceNow Studio, go into the table, and then just start messing with the form. And a build agent can do the form layout for you. Like if you can ask it, say, hey, I want these fields on the form, but you can just come and use our low-code tools if you want to do that. So this is the form layout that it created by default.
Pretty good.
That just shows you like the ability to kind of like switch in and out between like ServiceNow Studio, ServiceNow IDE, and use other platform tools that are available.
That was a clean form layout, though. I'll give it that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You'll see, actually, this is an interesting pop-up. So even though we don't actually change something, it probably changed something on the back end, like updated or some kind of field or file in the metadata. And it's like, hey, we noticed that you made a change to this application outside of IDE. Do you want to sync those changes? And I can just click sync here, and it will synchronize those applications, that application for me. So if I actually did make a change here, so if I change the column type, then it would like from a string to like a Boolean or something like that, or added a new choice or deleted a choice in Table Builder, it would then update the Fluent as well. So it's bidirectional now. Cool. Yeah, we've only got a few minutes left. I'm happy to run a little bit over. I know we have only really got into like 1 or 2 prompts with Build Agent so far. What else do we want to see?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other people with app ideas in their chat, but if you want to keep exploring this one too, it's up. What do you think is the coolest way to showcase the different stuff?
Yeah, I'm gonna switch over to something I prepared earlier. So I'm going to create a new chat with my emergency operations app. Now, I haven't actually created anything in here. What I have done, though, is I have created a bunch of stories. So let's see if this history still exists. Yeah, it does. So I did a brainstorming session. And I said, hey, I work for State Emergency Service here in Queensland. We have challenges with operational readiness. I want to create an app that helps volunteers do pre-deployment checklists so they can make sure they have all the equipment they need before they get out in the field. So safety, departure checklists for like completeness, for vehicles, for like kits. And basically we went through a brainstorming session. So we did multiple rounds of like question and answer. And then instead of, I basically halted it so I was like, don't create the app just yet. let's break it down into tasks. So high-level stories. So this is where the kind of like the collaboration aspect of Build Agent really comes in to, shows its strong points. And it's like, okay, here's how I would go and build that application. So we've got 8 also different stories. So we've got core data management, workflow, user interface. And then I said, okay, cool. Can you create the stories in the story table so we can track the development? And then it was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can create a story table for you in a new application scope. I'm like, no. No need to create a new table. There's an out-of-the-box table that you can use. So it was like, oh, is there? It searched for a table like story. It decided, okay, I'm going to use RM story. It understood the table schema, and then it created a bunch of stories. So if we have a look in our story table, we have 8 stories for this application. So now let's give it some instructions. Okay, so you have a bunch of stories to you. Let's see if it knows who it is. You take the first one.
And then I usually say at the end of those kind of things, because I keeping track of tasks is good to do in like MD in Markdown files too, separate. But my prompts are always like, don't forget to update the checklist or the stories as you build these out.
Let's see what happens, because it already does have an application. It's going to create
just made a new workspace.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So you can see where this really comes into like a strength, where it's like, now we have what are we calling it? Oh, maybe you know more better than I. Like there's this new concept on the platform. It's like agent, not buddies, or like pals or something like that. I can't remember the marketing name for it. But basically, we're going to have AI agents work alongside us. So if you can imagine, you're doing your you're planning for this new application, you're gathering requirements, you're documenting it, you're creating things like Miro and Figma, and doing all of that typical application development SDLC stuff before you actually write any code. You've written some stories. If Build Agent were to be an actual like entity within the instance where you could assign things to them, now we're entering the realm of like, it's like another part of your development team. You can assign a story to it. You can get it to build against it. You can get it to document what it did. I mean, it couldn't necessarily join your stand-up, but at least you could read out, the things that it built for you.
Like a build agent. It's like this, but as it stands all alone and operates separately, basically.
Yeah,
like an AI agent.
Yeah, we're not really hacking. This is not a. There's so many things that the tools that we've provided Build Agent allow us to do that weren't really programmed. We were like, hey, we want a Build Agent that can write Fluent files, or it can write TypeScript, it can manage the folder structure, all this kind of thing. But just because we gave it some interactivity with ServiceNow, there's like so much that it can do. Like writing documentation, writing knowledge base articles, that was never part of the plan. It was never like, hey, let's tick this off. Yes, it can do it. That's part of the acceptance criteria for Build Agent. That's just stuff that we've been discovering that it can do as we've been playing around with it. So I'm sure the audience, once they get their hands on this, will do the same. It's like, hey, we've got access to ServiceNow. It can understand, it. go out and build stuff against ServiceNow, because it already has a platform full of data that we can leverage. So yeah, we've built out story 1, and it's basically like, hey, do you want me to move on to story 2? It's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So this is kind of like, it's really, really interesting where we can take this. This will probably be something that we actually build into Build Agent in the future as like an actual feature.
to track its own progress kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But just because it can access the RM_story table and read from it, we can get it to go and build based on the acceptance criteria there, instead of me having to prompt it.
Do you know what this person meant by this question? Any plan to utilize Now Create while you use Build Agent or other quality control standardizations?
Yeah, so Now Create is a framework that a lot of our partners and expert services use to go and implement. So they can implement ServiceNow applications and workflows. And it has a lot of best practices involved in it. So while we probably won't be leveraging Now Create directly, we will allow our customers and developers to build their own foundational knowledge articles for Build Agent to refer to. So if you've got best practices around like, certain coding standards or certain schema, you can write those out for Build Agent to use. In the very, very short amount of time, I want to just quickly show something I was working on. That's the wrong conversation. So one of the cool things about the build system is that we can use it to import npm packages from elsewhere, from all over the web, right? So we now have a build stack that is built on top of Node, which allows us to basically leverage, the world of open source and the world of partner ecosystems, and bring that functionality into ServiceNow just through, doing updating our package.json file. So in this app, what I've done is I've actually imported a bunch of packages from Stripe, the payments processing platform, and created a simple hardware catalog app, which allows me to order catalog item, piece of hardware. The prompt was like, hey, I'm an ISP that wants to have an external catalog for my customers to order from. And so, I've created, well, I didn't create, I should say, Build Agent created, and I directed it to create this simple like catalog and shopping cart, which integrates with Stripe. So we have the Stripe checkout embedded directly within ServiceNow.
That's so cool.
One of the cool things is, this is not my actual credit card, so don't get too excited.
You're not 424242.
Stripe testing card. This is just going completely into like one of their sandboxes that I've created. So one of the cool things about it is that, we can then integrate back into one of our existing workflows, like request, and create a request item to go and fulfill. So, Stripe can be kind of like a payment gateway on top of, this application. And no, this is not built on Service Catalog itself. Like none of this is, a record producer or anything like that. We're just creating an SC_request in the end. But yeah, this just shows how you can use Build Agent and use this build system to integrate directly with other platforms by importing their packages and modules.
But it could be, right? Like there's nothing stopping you from building out a table structure or a catalog item structure with record producers and stuff like that, and then have Build Agent build the interface that interacts with that stuff.
Yep. Right? Yeah, exactly. In the future, once I understand service catalog for sure. Right now, this is just, a React-based, application. So I encourage everyone to like have a look at, how you can leverage code dependencies within your ServiceNow SDK built applications, and like leverage of the ecosystem of existing stuff out there. So things like importing mapping, diagramming. There's a whole bunch of cool JavaScript packages out there that you can leverage now that we have this build system in place. And Build Agent can help you wire it up to ServiceNow. So, Stripe requires a certain like handoff, ping pong bounce between like Stripe itself, ServiceNow. There's public and private keys involved, and you can create all of that interaction with the help of Build Agent. So this was one of the projects that I actually had to do some coding in because Build Agent couldn't quite get there. But that was around like the REST, scripted REST API. But 99% of this app was basically generated by Build Agent.
Cool, man. There are some questions in the chat, not about random different things. Oh, yeah. Hey, does it track who's invoking the agent at which checkpoint and everything?
Yeah, right now it's you. So you are in control of the agent. You are, the one asking it to do stuff. You are the one that is in the end building against the instance, and so you're the one that makes the changes. When Build Agent becomes, an AI agent in the sysuser table, maybe we'll think about, or if it does, maybe we'll think about, tracking that. But there are some ways to track it. There's a from IDE on the sysmetadata table where we can track whether it was created in ServiceNow Studio, Creator Studio, or ServiceNow IDE. So we'll start tracking Build Agent created files as well that way.
But like the nuance of, this part of the app was by Earl using the Build Agent. This part, Robert.
Yeah, there's no real separation unless you inspect like the chat history and what it actually created. But yeah, it's you at the moment.
Does this also work with delegated development?
That is a good question. I actually don't know. I don't think so.
I mean, you would have to be in the normal UI anyways to trigger all that stuff. No, because if you want to run Build Agent, you need it's admin though, right? Isn't it? Yeah, so you'd have admin anyways.
Yeah, we might look at respecting some of those delegated development. With delegated development, there's a lot of nuance in terms of like the things that people can create. Yeah, whether you can create flows or write scripts, that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure if the team has looked into that or if we ever will, because it's very code forward. It's not, at this stage, it's not a very low code friendly experience. You're right into ServiceNow IDE with a whole bunch of code in there. So
other things that happened earlier, this one would have been an easy layup. Ben said an app that is a focus timer with a checklist of task records associated with my user. That would have been an easy layup of an app to make.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the team, when they were creating Build Agent, had a bunch of like apps that they were adding as part of their testing, and the to-do app was one of those that they tested. And a lot of the times it's like single prompt, go and build it. It builds to do.
I feel like a to-do app is the most common vibe coded first try.
Exactly, right? It's like the hello world.
Yeah, it really is the hello world of vibe coding.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most recent comments also are saying they want more. Some people, they want more sessions like this so we can keep exploring.
Yeah, for sure.
Formative session. This was a first try. If people want more of this, we can. It still depends on like how we want to showcase it or what kind of things we can play with it. It hasn't been fully announced yet, but there are. I mean, people that follow the YouTube channel know that there are 3 live streams that happen regularly between myself, Travis, and Christy, all of us developer advocates. And we each host a live coding show that happens fairly often. We're all shifting to weekly. It hasn't been announced yet because we have been doing every other week, but Christy led the way in wanting to do it weekly, and now me and Travis are like, we do too. We don't like waiting 2 weeks to like continue an app we're building with everybody on stream. And so Build Agent, AI, Travis is right now doing a bunch of AI agent stuff. I do a lot of vibe coding stuff on mine, so we'll keep my stream. Robert probably will make appearances. Well, I'll have to shift the time if we want Robert to make appearances on mine, because it's in the middle of the night for you for my time slot.
Unfortunately, it is. Yeah. But this time works well for me. I mean, that's super cool. Like we definitely, this was just a first taste. Like we definitely need to take a use case and then like build it out all the way. And so maybe that's something that we do is we come up with a use case and we go from different angles, right? We do a lot of like foundational database stuff, workflow stuff. Maybe one of us is vibe coding, one of us is using ServiceNow Studio to build flows and things. And then we go into the heavy UI things. So yeah, it just needs a use case and for us to sit down and with a cup of coffee and chat about it for a while.
Joel from LinkedIn, maybe this might be one of the better mini hackathon ideas that we put on, is to replace the 404 page with a fun little game.
Yeah, I mean, if we got time, I'm happy to just sit and chat for a bit. But like one of the use cases was Wordle and Snake, so it can actually absolutely create like interactive things like that for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's a modern React framework. You could do anything at that point with it.
The Snake one took the avatars from all the users and had them as the little pills that you go and eat of the user accounts. That was really cool.
With the little pictures popping up, or is it just the names?
Little pictures, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was really cool. Eating Fred Luddy as your employee.
Able tutor over and over again.
Yeah, somebody mentioned PDIs. We are like, obviously this is part of the Creator Pro Plus analysis for Creator products. We are working on, I don't have a safe harbor slide, but I'll basically just say, please don't make any purchasing decisions based on stuff that you hear from me from now on, because I'll be talking a little bit about futurism. But we're working on trying to get it into PDIs, trying to get it into developer hands in some kind of like freemium way, because like interacting with Claude has a material cost to ServiceNow. Like all of the user prompts that you send to it cost us. We have like an OEM subscription with them, but putting into PDIs could burn Bill's credit card quite a little bit. So we'll see how that goes, but we'll probably put some limits on there when it does come into your hands as part of the PDI. But that's something we're working on, because we understand like this is, we want to see what you guys create, right? Like we want to see what the ecosystem creates once they get their hands on this kind of capability, and it's only going to enrich the ecosystem by empowering you. And that's also why we embedded it directly into the platform, right? We could have, and we have, like SDK is available. Let me just share my screen again. SDK is available like directly within like locally, right? Like this app can be built using the same SDK, the same Fluent DSL as what's on the instance. And I've even connected this to source control so that it is exactly the same app that is on the instance. If I make a change here, I can pull and so on and so forth. And so you can, if you want, use your own LLMs to do it. I've forgotten my train of thought now. But oh, sorry, yeah, and that's we didn't want people to have to set this up like on their laptops. I know some of you are like, oh yeah, this is my jam. I love doing this. But we wanted to make it embedded directly within ServiceNow, so you didn't have to go through this. And you could just get started so quickly without having to worry about, the LM that you're using. Oh, sorry, LM, not sharing anymore. The LM that you're using, or like setting up your local environment so that it works properly. We wanted to make it much more curated.
And when you use the SDK in VS Code, it will, because you're importing it via that framework, it's all documented within that import though, right? So it's like if you use your own coding assistant at that point, it'll just read through the Fluent framework and understand how to use that.
Shall we try that?
I mean, I've done it before, so you can show it off too. Yeah, so like building this in, right? Because like you can initialize this into a PDI app. It doesn't, right? It doesn't need a additional licensing though. The SDK is open.
That's right. The only build agent requires the licensing. The ServiceNow IDE, SDK, and Fluent, it's all open. You can build. So that's the great thing about SDK 4.0 is you can actually go and build React apps on your PDIs right now. You don't need build agent to do that. And that actually opens up the ServiceNow developer ecosystem to like developers that know the React build stack, right? Like all of a sudden, you don't necessarily need to know anything about ServiceNow platform to build an application that runs on ServiceNow. Obviously, it helps to know like that there's a sysuser table, there's locations, there's CIs, there's a bunch of foundational data that you can access because you're in the same platform as, you don't have to integrate into ServiceNow. You can build an app directly on and access it directly, all within the same high availability, the same security surface as ServiceNow. So yeah, the SDK 4.0 is almost as big a silent release that Build Agent is, because it opens up the platform to so many more skill sets.
Yeah, but you were saying at the very beginning, like it is because of SDK 4.0 that Build Agent even is able to do a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And SDK is just an NPM package.
That's right. It's just an NPM package. You can build it locally. You can still use SDK CLI locally and like deploy. I've been working on hacking around a little GitHub Actions like CI/CD framework as well, where you can basically, when you create a branch and then you create a pull request within GitHub, it runs a headless, build.
To build and deploy.
So it's like, hey, go and like run the SDK, build it, create the zip package to deploy it to a test instance, and then you could run, ATFs or something on the test instance, whatever. Like if you want to go down that pathway of like fully tooling ServiceNow, you can now, basically.
Cool. Maybe next time we do that from scratch too. Just show.
Yeah, I mean, I actually asked Build Agent to create those workflow files for me. So I was in the app and I was like, hey, can you create some GitHub Actions workflow YAML files for me that will actually go and build and deploy this application? And it did. So, and when I pushed it to GitHub. GitHub understood it and was like, yeah, you've got 2 workflows.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're creating the YAML files from there, it's going to try.
Yeah, so
you'll get the emails telling you if it didn't work.
It's definitely something I'd love to show off as well if you want to go down that path. But yeah.
Cool. Anything else you wanted to show off or run through? I know you briefly talked about CI/CD in there, and I knew that was on your list of things, but anything else?
Yeah, and so this is like, it's not specifically a build agent thing, but yeah, source control within ServiceNow IDE is just like VS Code, right? You can do branching, you can do all that kind of stuff. I'd really like to have a session where we have the full ecosystem of like you and I working on different sandboxes on the same instance, building out a feature, and then merging that into like mainline, just to see how that workflow should work now that we have developer sandboxes that allows you to have branching simultaneously.
Can the build agent, if you tell the build agent to commit, what will it do?
I don't know if it has access to Git tools yet. So that's some area. I mean, let's have a look. We can just ask it directly. I have ones connected to source control here.
Because when I'm working straight up in VS Code or something, I'm telling Claude a lot to commit, open, push to remote, open a pull request for me, document it.
Yeah. So you can see here that I've got some changes. Let's just add these in. Let's just stage everything. And let's get build agent open. And let's do a new. I'm not sure if it can do this. It can definitely understand the history of changes. Yeah, so I don't have the access to do it, but
it's telling you what to do.
And write a message for you, for sure.
So if you're in the SDK, your own CLI, you could run those commands.
With ServiceNow. Let's see what it has. So yeah, it can't do the Git lifecycle. I didn't think it could, but obviously you can ask it to write a commit message for you. You can just copy and paste it in here, and then commit. Yeah. So here's its tooling. Yeah, so it's got a bunch of file system stuff. So reading and writing files, directories, moving, deleting, all that kind of stuff. And then here's the ServiceNow tools. So getting knowledge sources, running queries on tables, getting table schema, deploying an application, creating ServiceNow application. So no Git integration yet, unfortunately.
Which, I mean, right now you would just switch interfaces and then press the commit button on like Studio.
We just do it here. I mean, Build Agent doesn't have access to Git, but ServiceNow IDE does have. So this is the source.
Just go in your CLI, right?
Sorry?
Just go into the CLI for the IDE then. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, you can just use this. So I've got stage.
Oh, yeah, the actual checkpoint.
Yeah. So like commit message, some changes. No, like the actual sidebar thing here. And so yeah, I've got here's my branches, so I can I can fetch from upstream if I've got any changes. But yeah, these are basically like the branches. I've got my checkout branch, I've got main, and I've got another branch here. You can easily just switch between the 2 or 3, whatever. So you can see here that it'll check out the branches. So it does show you all that sort of stuff here.
Cool.
And then yeah, once you push, you can obviously go into the repo and create a pull request, etc. And then obviously if you've got that checked out locally, the same thing. So this is the same Stripe app I've got locally. You can see I've got those branches available as well.
Yep. Some of the stuff,
here.
Yeah, I keep wondering because like the vast majority of our community is not used to some of these processes. So
yeah.
I'm always like, what parts do we have to stop and explain? But a lot of the fun part about the build agent side of things, like, oh, the SDK, oh, I don't know Fluent and stuff like that. Like just initializing your first Fluent app or touching build agent for the first time, like you'll learn a lot about how these app structures work just by touching those things. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I didn't know Fluent until I loaded the SDK in VS Code and then built a new app in my PDI. Like, I was like, oh, that's how Fluent works. I didn't that. And here's a structure for TypeScript files. And when I want to write my own JavaScript and stuff like that, this is how it structures it. And then I learned it.
Yep. Yeah. So the cool thing about Build Agent is you can use it as a learning tool. So not only like once you've imported the SDK and you've actually started using it and writing Fluent files yourself, you can also use Build Agent to help you understand things about ServiceNow or Fluent itself. So like what does the So you can just ask it questions about ServiceNow development itself. And like a lot of this will be based on like Claude's training data. You'll get the same or similar answers if you just went directly to Claude, but there will be some things that specifically around Fluent itself that you'll be better off asking Build Agent. So here's a nice nice definition of like what client callable does. And some examples. So this is, a Fluent definition of a script include with client callable set to true.
Or what Frank said on YouTube, vibe learning.
Vibe learning, for sure. I mean,
a lot of us have been doing that with like ChatGPT too. So there's that too.
Exactly. Like if you haven't been using an LLM to learn frameworks, try it, because it will blow your mind how better it is than just trolling the internet. Like, you should try replacing Google search with like, Google, the I'm feeling lucky button is like a poor man's version of like what an LLM can do, right? Like
I don't even use Google anymore. I use Perplexity.
Yeah, Perplexity. I mean, even if you just like using it for research, using it to understand a framework is so much better than, like, I'll give you an example. I tried to do some vision stuff in Python. Well, firstly, I didn't even know what framework to use. I was like, hey, I want to do some vision processing. I've got a video of like, my wife's really into animal rescue, and so she's joined this group called the BCRQ that does bat care and rescue and conservation. And when bats fly out of their roost at night, they have these what they're called big flyouts, where they literally just all of them at once go and leave the roost. And so I was like, I wonder if we could do colony counts by just like recording a video and then having, vision stuff counting all of the black shadows that are flying in the sky. And so I was like, okay, ChatGPT, how do I do this? And it's like, well, here's a bunch of frameworks that you could use. And I was like, okay, I used to write Python when I was in university. That was a long time ago. So let's like dust it off. Let's go. And within 30 minutes had an example going. And, that would have taken me hours of research to read the documentation for frameworks, just to decide which one to use. Then to scroll through a YouTube video of somebody like us talking about it for an hour and a half, try to find that, 30 seconds of gold. It's just such an amazing experience using an LLM for learning.
It's a new world.
As long as you don't put too much weight into, its decision, like be a skeptic, be a complete skeptic about what it puts out to you, and then try it yourself, and then make your own mind up. But yeah, very, very powerful tool, vibe learning.
And to tie it back to like coding assistance and stuff like that, read through the dialogue that it comes up with. Like, don't just come back to the result and then continue prompting. Like, you read through its thinking process, because you'll catch like, oh, it made a decision without your input. So if you need to go back, like I've gone down the rabbit hole of like, 7 prompts in, it made a decision 6 prompts ago that I wouldn't have done. And I was just kind of trusting it. So no, like you need to read through its thinking process and don't think it's just perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just showing you that like when I was learning about, the Stripe API and integrating that within my application, Stripe is actually in their documentation, like has a bunch of shortcuts for you if you're using an LLM. So you can copy this page in a format for an LLM and then paste it into Claude or ChatGPT, instead of just like, copying and pasting like this. It's actually got it in a nicely formatted way with some tweaks so that an LLM can understand it better. So, it's a brave new world where companies like Stripe realize that you will go out and use LLMs to learn about how to integrate with it. And they're creating an ecosystem for an LLM to better understand it itself. So that is something that we're working on from a build agent perspective of like, giving it the ability to do web lookups. Its knowledge, it's obviously built on Claude, so its knowledge limit is around the end of 2024. And so some of the things and the decisions that it makes about the packages that it include could be old or wrong. So make sure you check the NPM versions that it's importing. Make sure it's actually not importing a deprecated NPM package that nobody uses anymore because something replaced it. Those are sorts of things that you need to double check its work on.
Yeah. All the stuff that some of us have been shielded from, like, we got to maintain dependencies. What if it gets end of life? What do we do?
But it's like, but I mean, I'm in two minds about this whole thing because like people have been copying and pasting code from like Stack Overflow forever or other people's projects. And like, what's the difference?
That's true. Like, it is interesting though, because like, I mean, I'm a developer. When we are in the content creation game, so we're making these live streams and stuff like that, and blog posts and stuff like that. But it's such an interesting conversation because, like, gone is the day of search engine optimization. It's LLM engine optimization now. It's LEO. It's like it's different. There's ways to try to get your source to be the top of an LLM entry. It's such an interesting thing out there now, but I'm all for it, man. If it saves
Yeah,
me a few clicks.
I don't know enough about the science behind how they vectorize everything, right? So like, would it even like, is there even a way to optimize it? Maybe
Sort of.
not.
There are, at least, I mean, it's one of those things like they can always just change the model. They can change the way they train it. They can change the way they weigh it on the
Yeah.
on all of the different nodes that it brings it in. But there's a lot of research and theories about how it goes about. Like if you don't have like a summary paragraph at the very beginning, that might make it not a good source for it to recommend, because it wants to, if you already provide that little paragraph that it wants to give at the top of a code snippet or something, or at the top of Google, then you might not be the one that it shows. Like it's stuff like that. Like there, and there, I'll try to find the article, but there was one person that like showed like he lost all his traffic, but then got it all back when he started doing certain strategies of getting it into like LLM optimization, especially for like the ones that are live searching still, like Google's AI mode, Perplexity, Comet. Those things are still not based off of static data, but there are strategies on how to get it to ping yours at the top of the AI summary as a source.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Speaking of like papers, I read one recently that actually showed that using vibe coding or AI agent assisted coding was slower. A lot of the research papers that, you know, people have been putting out have been like, oh, you know, it's, and a lot of like the marketing around AI is like, oh, it's enhancing your productivity. But just beware that even Build Agent introduces latency into your flow. Like we talk about developers getting into a flow state where they're just like, you know, headphones on, deep within their development flow. That experience is going to change, or like, you know, like I don't know what a flow state looks like with an LLM as a companion because of the latency. Like you saw here when I prompt it, it spins for, you know, even 10 seconds is a long time to introduce latency into development, right? And so I would encourage people to still try and do as much manual coding as possible, because yeah, essentially what, I don't know, it's this thing that I just don't have enough experience with yet.
Well, I made a short that kind of made fun of it's like all the people are like, oh, all the dev jobs are going to disappear. It's all going to be about prompt engineering and stuff like that. And it's like, well then you're screwed because your soft skills suck. And it's like, what do you mean soft skills? It's like being able to completely describe your problem with clear steps and requirements and restrictions and like that's all about prompting and stuff like that. So maybe the flow state of devs is less a thing, but the ability to communicate what you want is going to be the main way people are really flowing, is because they know how to write. They know how to clearly state what they want very clearly when they prompt an LLM. Lots of things are changing.
Yeah, a lot of those people who can articulate requirements really well, like your BAs, your EMs, your product managers, will feel very, very empowered by vibe coding. And which is great because it's like it opens, it makes it more accessible building applications to people that don't necessarily have the coding skills.
But it is an interesting conversation what you were saying earlier. Like, does it increase productivity? It depends. It really depends. Like, if you were a highly productive person before, this will probably help you become a highly productive person in a different way. But it doesn't suddenly. Here's a fun stat. I think I can't remember where I read this, but I read an article saying if vibe coding was this thing that made suddenly every developer suddenly productive to be able to make new apps, then we would have seen an increase in apps releasing to the app stores of iOS on the Apple's App Store or the Google Play Store. And that's not the case. Over the last 6 months, it has been the same amount of growth as it has always been.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting.
it's an interesting thought. So it's like, well, I know I've become very much more productive, especially in actual real life cases of like the CreatorCon C3 app. Some of those things were vibe coded, and I was like, yeah, I saved a ton of time just doing it
So much time.
yeah, like I didn't have to. I know how to code a service portal widget from scratch and all of the features on it. But why, if LLM could do it 90% of it, and then I'll just do the last 10%?
Yeah.
I yeah, there's so many cases where I know my productivity went up. So I don't. So it's an interesting conversation. I don't know the answer of why, if vibe coding is becoming a much bigger thing now, why isn't more apps hitting the marketplace? It's interesting.
If you follow like the no code vibe coding subreddits, you'll see a lot of people get stuck. So I mean,
That's true.
it might be that, as I was saying, they get into this feedback loop where they just don't know how to move forward, or like,
I've seen that.
This build agent, right? It makes these schema architectural decisions very early on how your table looks, which underpins everything that it builds, right? It underpins the UI, it underpins the workflow. And if your architecture sucks, or was, you made the wrong decisions at the beginning because of a recommendation from an LLM, then that can really set you back, especially if you want to launch, right? You want to launch, you want to scale. Oh, my app's not scalable because I made poor decisions at the beginning.
It's all the exact same memes that have always been present. Like I saw one like a TikTok or something where the CEO came in and was like, fire all the devs, we don't need them anymore. I could just vibe code all the features. And he's like, oh, cool. So what did you vibe code? He's like, it's right here. The app is done. He's like, all right, can you deploy it? And he's like, it's right here. And it's like the URL is localhost 3131.
Yeah.
It's like it's the same things, because like that same thing happened to me when I was trying to build an iOS app. It's like, oh, I need to, like, knowing Swift is almost necessary still. Knowing like, oh, I had to learn Railway because I needed it. Like you can't do shared databases if you don't know how to do cloud. So you still have to learn all of these new frameworks and all these new systems. And if you didn't have that skill set before, you're not going to suddenly be building new apps anymore. If you're building personal apps that run locally on your machine, vibe coding is great for that right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But the moment it needs to integrate with other things, that's like, it doesn't do that for you. So you still need to know some of the harder things to know as a developer. Like integrations is one of those like level ups for ServiceNow developers that I say, like, if you start integrating with other systems, that's you've leveled up in your development career, because that's a harder thing to do. It's the same thing. Like, vibe coding is not going to solve those parts for you, but it will. But hopefully you will have more time to learn those systems if vibe coding is taking away a lot of the mundane 90% of the coding that you know how to do, but you don't have to anymore.
Yeah. Especially if you're very particular about the way that it supports your learning. So when I was working on this little vision project, I was like, okay, don't just give me the code, step through and talk to me about like what it's actually doing. Like tell me how, like why you made these decisions, why you've got this if statement in here, what it does, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's even great to be like, okay, I'm going to try and explain what I think you've built to you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Because teaching is an awesome way to reinforce your learning. And like, even if it's to an LLM, like still going through that process of being like, here's how I understand what you've built. And then it correct you, and then it kind of like reinforces like what you already know and what you don't know. And that's really, really important when you're using these tools. Oh man, I'm seesawing so much back and forth between, like, this conversation's got me like hopeful for the world of developers, right? Like I'm like, yeah, we're not gonna be replaced. We're still gonna be completely needed and necessary, but that's
developers are going to be needed. I fully take a stance, and I could talk at length at it. I do think certain skills will be more important than other skills, but I do and the developers that have those certain skills or practice those certain skills will be more successful than all the other developers. There are entire industries, or not even industries, entire job roles that I know will likely like not get eliminated, but be severely reduced because of AI. But there's so many things right now still probably, and I feel like with at least for another few years before AI gets too good, that AI, like a human dev is needed to get certain things done. Period. Like always.
Yeah.
My fear, and I don't know how many people are still watching, is like
I don't know.
Is the junior dev role is really hard because AI assistants are really good junior devs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
but how do you become a senior dev if you never have if you're not ever hired for a junior dev role to learn all that stuff that makes a senior dev good at using the AI tools? It's such a weird situation. But yeah, like junior roles are going to be hard to come by if AI is really good at that stuff.
Trends are another area where I feel like if we're all using the same, and it's good that the ecosystem is like there's lots and lots of different LMs, Windsurf and Claude, and a bunch of different things that can help you build. But if we were all using very similar tooling, like are we going to have a convergence of like everything uses the same, like, systems, the same design language, like, because we're all relying on these tools who are basically making very similar decisions all the time. I know that's not necessarily true. There's like, arguments for and against that with regards to like, just the non-deterministic nature of LLMs.
Right.
But that does concern me as well from like, and we've already seen that from a language perspective. I think there was a paper that was like, hey, here's the increase in incidence of certain terms in UK Parliament, like just shot up over the last couple of years. And it's like, it's because everyone's using, LLMs to like refine their speeches. And so it's introducing very similar things like across the board in terms of like the way they open their addresses and all this kind of stuff. And it might be that it's just like, that's a trend. That's like that's pop culture, but it could also be the influence of LLMs causing that. And so like, are we all going to enter a sort of mediocrity stage of apps, which are all very, very similar? Like we saw Bootstrap being used by Build Agent. It's like they all look the same. I mean, consistency is good in some circumstances because user experience, like being transferable, is very important sometimes with systems. But like the innovation might stall. I don't know, because we're not like.
I mean, that's a big conversation. The AI slot. We've talked about that for a while too before one time, but I don't know. You mentioned the deterministic nature of these kind of things. Like if we know, I don't know. I'm always confident with until we get to AGI. But an LLM is so, just by the nature of what an LLM is, it cannot create something new. Like it can't until, like it can reinterpret certain things until it comes up with, but like I'm hoping for the innovation of human nature that when we start slopping everything and everything starts to look the same and we don't have a framework that addresses certain things, a dev will come along and come up with a new framework, and that will be incorporated into different things. My hope is that, right? Like, I don't know. You have a different viewpoint from that? Because you kind of like
creating new things is such a difficult thing to define.
Right. But
it's like you have artists who are inspired by other artists and use similar techniques, but then they create something new. They apply it to a different subject, or they apply it to a different medium, like, and you can say, oh, this is new, this is groundbreaking, but it's built on top of the work of previous artists. I agree that LLMs are constrained by their knowledge and their source of truth in terms of like the responses they give, but aren't humans also? I mean, the creativity comes from like my experiences as a person and what I've been exposed to, and the conversations that I'm having now. And so like you could say if I created something new, then this is very existential. Like
Right.
I've
Like,
been influenced by my past experiences, right? I'm not necessarily.
And I'm okay with being on different sides of the
Yeah.
spectrum with that, because like I do believe in inspiration. So you can be inspired by people, but you can also have an inspired moment, right? Like
Shower thoughts.
it's still influenced by past stuff, but there are moments where new things can happen in ways that I don't see by knowing how a language model works, that I can't determine that will happen in the same way. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm okay with that. I'm hopeful. Also, I hear the garage opening. I probably got to go. My 2 and 5-year-old are about to burst in here and go all over the place. So I'm gonna start wrapping that stream up. This is we finally got into our existential conversations. I'm glad we did, because people get a touch of it now.
If you're watching this back and you managed to like get to this stage, like kudos to you.
I know all of you people watching
sticking with us.
Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. Let us know if you are watching this part. Do you like the demo side of things? Do you like the AI trend and conversational kind of side of things? Because
we can keep this private if we don't need to to stream it. But yeah, it's, as you said, Earl, it's like very important that we have these conversations in public so that people have the language and they can learn from other people in terms of like how people are talking about certain technology and the ideas that are out there. Yeah, it's I get benefit from these sorts of conversations that other people are having, but you just don't know about them, and unless you're a part of them. So we want to make sure that we make this community a part of our conversations. So
nice. All right, well, I will get a blog out with this, with as much summaries of this. The chapters on this video are going to be insane on YouTube.
Yeah, dude.
But we'll see what it turns out to be. Thank you, Robert, for hanging out, and we'll see you all later.
Yep. Thanks, Earl.
Here's the end screen.